right, well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And I have two amazing writers here tonight for you. Emily Hockaday is on the right over there. She is the author of Blood Music, an actual copy of that, In a Body, and Naming the Ghost, and 6 other chapbooks. Chapbooks are like little tiny books of poetry. She is a DeGroote Foundation winner of note and has received grants from Flushing Town Hall, the New York NYFA, what is that?
NYFA, New York Foundation for the Arts.
New York Foundation for the Arts, Queens Arts Fund, Cafe Royal Cultural Foundation, and a New York City Artist Corps. Emily writes about ecology, parenthood, the urban environment, and chronic illness. And you can find her online at her website and on what used to be known as Twitter.
Right? Oh, I'm not on there anymore.
Oh, okay.
I gotta update that bio. Yeah.
All right.
Blue sky now.
Find her at her website. That's right. Anywhere else?
Instagram.
And Instagram. Okay. And on Instagram. Super. Christine Candick Torres is the author of the novel The Girls and Queens. Thank you very much. Which was selected for the American Library Association's 2023 Rise Feminist Book List. Her Pushcart Prize-nominated work has been published in outlets such as Literary Hub, Electric Literature, The Rumpus, Wigleaf, The Offing, and Quelly. Is that how you say that? Mm-hmm. Okay. She is a recipient of a Jerome Foundation Emerging Artists Fellowship for Fiction at the Anderson Center and a New Work grant from the Queens Council on the Arts. Her work has additionally been supported by residencies and workshops from Hedgebrook, Bona, Vermont Studio Center, Roland Writers Retreat, and the Macondo Writers Workshop. Born and raised in New York City, Christine currently resides in Connecticut and is the fiction editor for the Connecticut Literary Anthology series. So please welcome them with me. So the program tonight, each writer will read for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to quiz them for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to open it up to you for questions for about the last 15 minutes. So if you have things on your mind, be sure to write them down so that you remember when you're ready. Christine, I think you said you wanted to go first.
Sure, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I should use the mic, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is not on.
Hello. Whoa, look at that. I appreciate you coming out in the rain. It's not raining yet. I am the author of The Girls and Queens. I'll tell you a little bit about it, but I'm not going to read from it tonight, but we will talk about it a little bit later. The Girls and Queens is a literary novel about the lifelong friendship and fierce loyalty between 2 young Latina Mets fans. Go Mets, I hope, this week. I'm sorry for that. They're hanging on. It's about their friendship and the one of their old boyfriends who's accused of sexual assault. And at first the girls rush to his side to defend him. And then one of them, Brisna, so the girls are Brisna and Kelly, Brisna begins to have second thoughts and reevaluates her relationships with men in general, and both girls have to decide not only what justice means, but who deserves it. So, it's a light romp, and it's a book that's very dear to me, and it takes place in Queens, obviously, where I grew up. The book that I'm going to be reading from tonight is a novel that I've been working on, and it takes place between Queens and Culebra, Puerto Rico. Is anybody familiar with the 2 small islands off the coast of Puerto Rico? So there's Culebra and there's Vieques. Puerto Rico is technically an archipelago. It's not just a big island. My family comes from both of those islands, and I've set a story there to talk about, I call it a ghost story about reproductive justice. So I think I'll leave it at that and tell you that what I'm about to read is from 1950. It's set in 1950, and the main character is Arcadia. Her sister is Paca, and Paca's husband is Tiburcio. Arcadia saw the flash of white at Don Miguel's bar after her kids had gone to sleep. Sitting on the hammock her father had hung from the cement porch ceiling outside their family house, she squinted and leaned out over the raucous street scene below. In the crowd, she could make out the dark quills of his jet black hair slicked to one side like a porcupine. And when he turned to plunk his change down on the table as a tip, She could make out the sharp angle of his nose that confirmed it was him, Walters. She had received a disappointing letter from Sixto that morning that he would need probably another year of working at the Domino Sugar Factory in Brooklyn to be able to afford to send for the entire family. But if she wanted to come ahead and leave the kids behind with Paca, the two of them together could probably earn enough to bring everyone sooner. Well, Arcadia thought, that was not going to happen. She wasn't going to leave her kids on this island to get blasted to kingdom come without her there to do everything she could to protect them. She leaned over the ivory balustrade on their balcony to look out over Dewey, their tiny hamlet louder than usual because of a group of sailors at the bar. Usually they were only in town during high training season, but from what Arcadia could tell, this seemed to be a farewell party, and in the middle of the fuss, receiving pats on the back and shot after shot, was the sweaty and red-faced Officer Walters she knew well from her youth. Farewell indeed, she wished silently. Farewell to them all. Paca, Arcadia hissed, I'm going to the bar for a minute. At this hour, Paca threw her dish towel down into the sink. Are you crazy, a woman alone? Yeah, Arcadia waved her off. I'll be okay. We know everyone on this island. Ten cuidado, Paca warned her. Los marineros de afuera. She pointed down toward the plaza with her lips. A select few Navy officers lived on Culebra instead of the main base on Isla Grande, like Tiburcio did when he was on active duty. These were usually younger, more inexperienced recruits led by 1 or 2 seasoned officers. They lived at the observation tower built on top of the mountain that abutted the airport, the land where Arcadia and Paca's childhood home had stood before their family was given 24 hours to evacuate before the full force of the U.S. Navy rained down upon them. That's what the telegram had said. Arcadia's ears peaked to language from her English lessons in the island's one-room schoolhouse. How rain could come down on you to bring life or to take it. Home, she concluded as she slipped on basic flat chanclas, was always a transient idea. A tin roof on the hill or a concrete structure in town. The island of Culebra or the island of Manhattan. Her heart was the only home she could depend on, and now it was divided 5 ways and across oceans. She was determined to gather the pieces in one geographical place and make them whole again. Maybe they're friends of Tiburcio's, Arcadia playfully called over her shoulder. Paca sucked her teeth. You know they're not. Arcadia gave her an inscrutable look and skipped down the concrete steps onto the main street below. The sun was just nearly extinguished in the sky, a hot pink lip of the last embers of daylight. The fruit stands were long closed, but she decided to sidle up 3 chairs down from the blinding white suit of Officer Walters, crouched over a glass of rum at the bar. She sometimes treated herself to a Coca-Cola, so if Paca was watching, she shouldn't think it was too strange. Oiga, she called over Don Miguel. Do you have any Coke left in the icebox? Last one. He placed it, instantly sweating in the evening humidity on the bar. Dulce, Walters smirked. That was the nickname he had called her since she was a child and sold candies to him, dulces, out of the window of the house they'd moved into after the family was forced into town. You will never know my real name, Officer Walters, Arcadia said in perfect English. Walters appraised her, momentarily surprised. He looked as if he was about to say something and then seemed to think better of it and drank another large gulp of the brown liquor. He swallowed and locked eyes with Arcadia. I don't think I'd want to, he said. I want to keep you sweet. She fought from bristling against this and focused instead on the sound her nails made tapping against the glass of Coke. So is this it? She asked, nodding to the streamers strung above her. You're leaving? Change of station, he burped. Oahu. Her eyes widened. She tried not to sound too hopeful. Pearl Harbor? She didn't keep her head in the sand like Paca. She read the papers. She listened to the men talk on the street. Look at you, Miss Dulce, Walters said. You know your world maps. Arcadia bit her tongue, recalling the feel of the fiber-torn corners of the atlas she'd stolen from a cousin in Santurce as a child. She still showed it to Raquel and Carmen every night. This is where we are, she'd point to the archipelago. And this is where Papi is, she'd point to the long comma of Long Island. Officer Walters tapped the bar for another shot of rum. Don Miguel obliged. Probably be in Korea before too long, he said, and knocked back the shot. This was good, Arcadia thought, cupping the condensation from the Coke and palming the sweet relief first against her neck and then her collarbone. Walters watched every move. This would help her feel stronger in her resolve. Walters gave her a sly, sideways glance. You gonna miss me, Dulce? Arcadia cleared her throat, placing one hand over the other on the bar. I have a business proposal for you. He let out a laugh that clapped through the thick air like thunder. I shouldn't be surprised, he smiled, canines glinting in the warm orange glow of the gas lamps on the street. It used to be her father's job to light each and every one before arthritis gnarled his hands and prevented him from continuing the work. You've always been a bit of an entrepreneur. I don't want information, she flinched, misunderstanding the word. I want money. Walters glanced quickly at Don Miguel, but Miguel was engaged with a group of men playing dominoes in the corner. He adjusted himself on the stool so that his hips were open, facing Arcadia. Okay, he leaned in. And why would I give you money? He acted as if he was peering behind her shoulder. You still got some candies for me, Dulce? I remember what it is you really want, Arcadia said, fighting a butterfly of nerves at the base of her neck that fluttered its wings up to her lips. She smiled. You remember? Walters licked his lips and glanced again at Don Miguel and back at Arcadia. I never forgot, he said, looking down at her legs. Well, Arcadia crossed them. I need money. So you can have what it is that you want, if you pay me. Walters raised his eyebrows and laughed. She didn't like it. I don't have to pay for it, he said soberly. Arcadia felt seized by an instant pang of regret, afraid suddenly of the violent turn this could take. She never should have tried this. No, was all she said aloud. She hopped down off the stool and grabbed her coat, but Walters grabbed her thin wrist in his hand. It was big and rough, like she remembered, his grip strong. Wait, he said, inching his face toward her so that she could smell the coconut and malt on his breath. How much? She looked up at him, summoning all the courage she had in her body to stand tall. $200. He exclaimed. She wrested free of him. Yes, dollars. I need to move my children away from here. It's too dangerous. That's what you all want anyway, isn't it? She nodded at the navy stripes on his lapels. He ignored her, rubbing his hand through his hair, considering the offer. I don't think I have that kind of cash on me. Arcadia shrugged, both relieved and disappointed. Then forget it. She turned to leave, but he kept on. No, he said. What I mean is I don't have that kind of cash here with me at the bar. Come to the observation tower with me. I should have it there. The idea of traveling in a jeep with him up the mountain alone was scarier than her proposal, which she'd imagined as a quick fuck in the alley behind the colmado. She bit her lip and looked up at the darkened house, the hammock empty and swaying gently in the evening breeze. She looked back at Walters and nodded. Okay, she said. Vámonos. Very few of the native Culebrenses had cars. Riding in a vehicle was an unusual experience for Arcadia. Sure, she had ridden in taxis on the Big Island when she traveled to Fajardo and San Juan for fabric and materials, but on Culebra herself, barely ever. This is bumpier than I expected, she said. I'd rather be on a horse. Walters grinned and placed a hand on her thigh. It felt lethally hot against her, but she refrained from asking him to remove it. She wasn't his girlfriend. This was business. She kept quiet. You will be soon enough, he said, taking his eyes off the road to study her reaction. Please, she pointed at the road, a nervous edge to her voice. Look. He brought both hands back onto the wheel. Don't worry, Chiquita, he said, and she grimaced at the word in his mouth. I can do this drive in my sleep. He chuckled. As a matter of fact, I pretty much have. They reached the top of the mountain and they bounced hard against the leather over the lip of the driveway. She had missed this view. It was the view of her youth, where her father had 2 cows and chickens, and even a swan that lived in a small pond on the property. What a cruel thing it was to invade someone's home, their sanctuary, and raze it to the ground. And for what? For war? For machines? Walters killed the engine. Take off your clothes. Here? Arcadia asked. What about your cash? It's inside. She turned to the window, peering at the dark barracks, save for the lighthouse pulsing overhead, illuminating the sea. Show me. I will. He reached over the stick shift for her, but she pulled the passenger door handle and slid out. She didn't know where this courage had come from. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, and she imagined this was what drugs or superheroes in Kike's comic books felt like. She was Superwoman, or something like it. Cash first. Walter sucked his teeth and tapped the steering wheel. When he got out and walked around the hood of the Jeep, he gave an annoyed quick flourish of his wrist. After you. They walked in through the unlocked front door, which she found peculiar, and she was struck by how neat and orderly the main living quarters were. He showed her down a small hallway to the last door on the left. Inside the dark room, he pushed her up against the wall, his large hand on one of her breasts as he kissed her, his bottom teeth gnashing against her top lip. She pushed him away, maintaining one hand on his chest. I told you, she said. I want the cash first. That's not how this works. That's how I work. He grumbled something under his breath and slammed open and closed the drawers on the single nightstand beside his single bed. Outside, every few seconds, the beacon above them would swing back around and the light would fill the tiny room. "You're really something else," he turned back toward her, peeling $20 bills away from a money clip. 3, 4, 5, she counted. "Or you think you are. 7, 8, 9. But when it comes right down to it," he shoved the cash into her fist. "You're no better than a whore, just like the rest of you mongrels." Arcadia wished she'd been prepared for that, but the words still landed like a blow to her chest, and Walters was already lifting up her skirt and reaching for her underwear. "This is not enough," she showed him the bills in her hand. "Not all of it." Walters was unbuckling his pants. "You'll get the rest when we're done." He reached for her hips to bend her over. She was about to let him take her like that when her eye caught the glint of the money clip on the dresser and the lighthouse's beam. She swiveled and grabbed him by the shoulders, throwing him down onto his bed. He may have been a serviceman, but she carried loads of heavy laundry up and down the street every day. She was no weakling. "What the fuck are you?" She pressed a finger to his lips and climbed on top of him. "Be quiet," she told him coolly, feeling electricity crackle through every cell in her body. She slid onto him and he grunted an involuntary sound like a dog getting hurt. She rocked her hips, one foot on the ground, her right arm balancing against the wall while the fingers on her left hand reached for the money clip. She wouldn't take it all, she reasoned. Just a little extra to hold them over. And why not? How much had the Navy taken from her? Besides, he was leaving the next day, shipping out. There would be no retribution to risk. She knew well from her first husband, who seemed to drink as much as Officer Walters, that soon after he released himself, he'd likely pass out. Judging by his glazed red eyes, he was already near that point. She wished she'd asked him about the rubber condoms she had heard about the men receiving in Europe. Paca had found one in Tiburcio's uniform and confronted him about it. He swore up and down that every military personnel that was shipped off received some just in case to protect against disease. She looked down at Walters, eyes closed and moaning, searching his face for evidence that he might make her sick. The light shone. She faked a moan to cover the sound of her 2 fingers swiping the money clip off the side table like a cigarette. She could embroider handkerchiefs until her cuticles bled. She could sew dresses until her eyes went blind and she collapsed over her Singer machine. It wouldn't be enough to get her to Nueva York. She knew she had to think outside the box. And what had her mother warned her about? What men want. What los marineros were after. It was a resource she was in possession of, and at least this way, she was in control. She was getting something out of it, for her family, for her future. The lamp above them continued to turn, and on the next beat of light that cycled in through the single brick-lined window in the sparse room, she caught sight of his green eyes, a light with the satisfaction of having won something, having won her. He began bucking beneath her and muttered, "I knew it, Dulce. I knew I'd have you." Arcadia could see so clearly in that brief moment, see the black lines of his irises bracketing the green, like a leaf in the mangroves that her father taught her to catch snapper in before the Navy commandeered the forest. It was then that she felt a little stitch of her soul come loose, not because of the man between her legs who wasn't her husband, but because her body was a kind of a home too, and she'd sold it. Her father had taught her that though Culebra was only officially settled by the Spanish 2 generations ago, that didn't mean people didn't exist there before. He told her of the Taínos and the Caribs that lived in the hills where the ceibas grew, the Irish pirates that hid treasures in its quays and stayed, the enslaved Africans that had rebelled and escaped neighboring island nations, finding safe harbor in Culebra. "They are all a part of you too," he'd said, gently pinching the soft lobe of her ear. What would they say if they could see her? Would they recognize survival? The light swept in once again, and the shadow of her torso against the wall startled her. What might she have unleashed by taking this action? For her family, she reminded herself. Her family. She closed her eyes and rocked and balanced herself against the wall with her right hand, closed in a fist around the wad of US $100 bills she had not and would not let out of her grasp. Thank you.
That was fabulous. I am going to mostly read from my newest collection, Blood Music, but
I'm going to start with a few poems from the book that came out just before it, In a Body, because this is a book about chronic illness and chronic pain, and I threw my back out, so I'm in pain. So I was like, you know what? This is the right vibe for me today. So I'm just going to do a few from this one. Also, In a Body is like eco poetry, and a lot of the poems have body in the title. It's like a titling convention. This one is titled Not the Body. My child asks me about the parts of my body, my scars and purple spots, the soft pulp of my breasts, the claws and fur and fangs. I shake my mane in her face. She laughs like a baby. I don't know what to tell her. This body is ephemeral. It is not the body it was. It is only itself at this exact moment. I don't tell her about the lump that grew in my nursing breast or the calcifications in the cockles of my ovaries. I don't tell her about the chemicals in my brain. It made you, I tell her. It can be strong. You grew inside, and I pushed you all the way out. This next one is Stargazing on Fire Island. It's one of my favorite places to go and think about ecology. Between mosquito generations, we stand on the porch and stargaze like I always imagine I do here on Fire Island, but rarely can. We point to Jupiter and Saturn over the low canopy of holly and beach plum. Mars is beneath our feet on the day side. I miss the sweet malt of beer, how it made everyone, even the planets, closer. But was it real? Without a drink, I'm afraid. I don't want to be boring. I tilt my head and let the stars run down my throat. If I look long enough, I can convince myself that I don't really exist. The universe is everything and nothing, and so am I. All right, and this last poem that I'm going to read from this book is where I'm going to bring the pain. It's titled View Over Harbor Hills Moraine, and a moraine is a glacial hill, so like a hill that was created when a glacier came through and dropped off a bunch of rocks and dirt. And there's a glacial moraine just like a couple blocks away from the house where I live in Queens, and it stretches basically through most of Queens and almost all of Brooklyn. So it's a very long hill covered in cemeteries. Tonight, when I don't sleep, I look out the window to the wooded glacial hill over the row houses. Earlier today, my child pointed to the pink half moon and said, "It doesn't glow." Ache, at once familiar and alarming, moves along the tight lines of my raised hip and shoulder and the knob and kettle of my knees and ankles. Out there, the terminal moraine is the raised curve of this resting landmass. The bedrock below unreachable, far beneath sea level. Moving ice deposits left rubble and glacial erratic and silt that composes the body of our home. I wonder what pain leaves behind. I am a body of stone and gristle. I am a reflective surface. I pull a pillow between my knees. I sink to the bottom of myself. I know if I sink far enough, I'll be below the pain. I'll find bedrock. So now I'm going to read a few from Blood Music before I end with a couple new ones. And Blood Music, I've been calling it a semi-autobiographical collection. It's narrative, it follows chronological order, and it chronicles the time in my life where I became pregnant and my father was diagnosed with ALS. And in that time, he died. Well, no, the order is my child was born, a few months later he died, and then there's like the third section of the book is mostly grief and also kind of like new parenthood poems. And there's also a character in the book who is a loved one with addiction issues. So I think I am going to read a couple of poems about that, but I'll definitely give content warnings before I do, so you're not surprised by anything. The first poem I'm going to read is titled 145 BPM, beats per minute, and this is the poem where I extracted the title Blood Music. When I see the ultrasound of her heart, the only movement within that small fetal body, it is like an alien creature, flapping fitfully and with great difficulty. I do not think of my own heart this way, independent, with its own purpose and agenda. The clenching is pronounced, jerky. It should be no surprise they give out. Fetal heart rates will match a mother's racing pulse despite the separate closed systems. The music of blood is constant and loud inside the body. When I jog, her heart harmonizes, a synchronized thumping, saying, I hear you, I am here. Okay, so this next one, content warning. There is mention of drug usage and an overdose. And it's a ghazal, which is a form of poetry where the last word of each couplet is the same, and the speaker says their own name in the last line of the poem. So it's just titled Ghazal. Easter has passed, and in Brooklyn, the Cherry Blossom Festival approaches. Trees in Forest Park unfurl tiny blossoms. The season is deceptively mild. On the kitchen table, the arm of sunny Forsythia distracts me from the awkward silence that's blossomed after my brother's overdose. It had to be brought up. Petals from overripe blossoms scatter the lawn below the mock orange bush, wafting heavy perfume through the window. Love blossoms within me, inextricable from grief. I know it's hard to reach out and say, I'm hurting. He's delicate, bright, sensitive to changing weather patterns. We all have finite seasons, even Emily, even these fresh spring blossoms. This next one is for now, my quote-unquote birth poem. I feel like I probably have more in me, but they haven't been written yet. Pain Theory. There is only the memory of the experience. The pain itself is impossible to recall. I remember saying to you, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the longest I'd gone without thinking of my dying father. All other anxieties trumped by what the body knew to do. I am handed a stranger while the doctor pulls a needle through me. Quick, tiny metal bites. The babe is quiet now, but red from screaming. Her hands are tiny, grasping creatures. I know how you feel, I think. This next one is titled Morning Thoughts on Reincarnation. As children, we grew caterpillars into smooth green chrysalises. They shimmered like jewelry. Once metamorphosed, the new creatures lit on the small rosebush my mother diligently cut back winter after winter. During the warm months, we put banana peels beneath the glossy leaves. We didn't know then that the caterpillar was melting into cellular soup. The butterfly was a stranger. This last one's another little short one titled Magic Hour. We sit on the back porch while my father uses the ventilator inside and watches TV. The light is golden, and a deer wanders through a manicured landscape in the retirement community. The chance to reminisce with him has come and gone. No fanfare, no last-minute warning. Your father is about to disappear. This one, the last couple, I'm like, it's still a book about death and grieving. But I feel like at the end, hopefully, they get a little more hopeful and a little bit kind of stepping outside of it. And that's what this one is about. kind of deciding to come back, to back away from grief. And I also managed to shoehorn in some fun science facts, so that's something I love to do, yeah. It's titled Beneath the Ice. Even in the greatest depths of my grief, molten laughter bubbles to the surface. The baby climbs from the rocker to the couch, unhinged from sugar and pre-bedtime nerves. The look on her face, determined, psychotic, earnest. Greenland sharks, like all ectotherms, live in almost freezing water, low metabolisms, economic in their energy expenditure. I learned that the oldest known Gurry shark is 320, give or take 120 years. This puts my loss in perspective. We're a blur of life and death above the waterline. What was my father's own 63 years? What is my life? What is the span of our generations to a creature who lives in slow motion? I know time is relative. My therapist emphasizes the moment. Tonight, I pull the baby close, my nose pressed to her hair, lips against her warm skull, still forming and hardening. I breathe, and she notices, a giggle. It tickles. I am sick of living with ice in my blood. I am ready to come back to time that, whether I like it or not, moves. And then this is the last one that I'm going to read from Blood Music. I have a couple new ones for you after this. Again, content warning for drug usage, but again, I feel like this is more toward the end of the book, and hopefully there's some hope in here that I felt while I was writing it. Relapse. My brother says he's not using. Meteorites streak across the sky like heroin entering his veins. My brother says he's not using, but Instagram holds his skin under scrutiny. How do I know? The dark comes earlier, but still waits at the corners of the day. I close my eyes to get there faster. My brother says, I'm not using right now. I trace the photos he posts on socials. I leave a bag of food outside his door. I tuck in a box of fresh picked blueberries. My child pulled the purple orbs from the bushes with joy. My brother says he's not using. The porous skin on the fruit absorbs our love, this hopeful resilience. I know the flavor of it, potent and sweet. The last two I'm going to read are from a new collection that I'm working on titled I Dared the Storms to Come. And this one is another, like in a body, it's a lot of eco poetry, and there's some climate poetry in there as well. And then also there's a big section of it, although I'm not going to read those poems, so there's a big section of it that takes place during the COVID lockdown in New York City, where I was at the time, and where I spent a lot of time out in nature, because that's what we could do. So the first one I'm going to read of these two is called After Ida. And in Queens we had, and I know here in Connecticut as well, there was just a lot of flooding when we got the remnants of that storm. And it was eye-opening to me, and to kind of show the infrastructure of the city and like what was and wasn't there. After Ida, we saw how root deficient a city can be. Around the homes in Queens, cement, lawn grass, and astroturf, unable to contend with the changing climate. Where the brush is wild, the ground is a sponge, torrents be damned. I tried to be like that when everything hit the fan, a garden with underground absorption to mitigate floodwaters. I planted hardy growth with thirsty root systems. I cleared cement to make way for greenery. I dared the storms to come, and of course, they came. And this next one is titled, Dear Animal, for A. After kindergarten, we come home and meditate. Like mine, Your body needs coaxing to become calm. Then we play in the garden. I talk to my sprouts and you dig for pill bugs. I am gentle as I pluck crinkled leaves from stems. The ground cherries need longer to grow golden and plump, but their small flowers are becoming husks. Before I know it, I am imagining your future without me. I try to picture the movement beneath us, the wriggling grubs and ants and worms. I can't stop the vibration of the earth or the passage of time or even my heart, which I want in the sweet spot of beating, but not beating too much. Sometimes you are so bright, I have to squint. A catbird calls from the laundry ladder, and I remember where I am, what I'm supposed to do. I hold your future in my fingers too tight. It is a duckling trying to wriggle away. I open my hands and free it like I'm meant to.
All right, well, thank you both so much. Those were wonderful. All right, so Emily, you apologized a lot for the darkness in your work. Shouldn't a writer write about darkness? Your work was pretty dark too. So what about that?
I just want to say I was nervous about how many children might hear me halfway through, but I figure you guys could handle it. Shouldn't a writer write about darkness? Yeah, that's where I have fun, the most fun. Like that, I feel like that's what's most worth exploring in a way. I think that the dark is what brings me to the page to dig in and figure out why I might have some darker impulses, and also how we found ourselves in this dark world we are currently in. That being said, I think, well, I don't know. I'll let you talk about the darkness. I was just going to say, I think we need to, I try to root my writing practice in love. Even when I'm writing about the darkest aspects of history, of things that have really happened, about things that women have experienced, that they continue to experience, if I know that I am coming to the page with love and honoring it in a way, then I feel like I won't go wrong, or I won't be bogged down in the darkness.
That is a great answer, and it reminded me that when I was querying this book, Blood Music, I called it a book about love. I was like, this is a book about death and birth and addiction and how love functions in those times, right? Like, it wouldn't be sad and dark to write about my loved one with addiction if I didn't love them so much and want them to be okay. And it's the same thing with grief poems, right? I'm writing about my dad because I loved him and he was the best, you know? And so there is room for darkness and love to coexist, and they kind of inform each other. And I should apologize less.
Just own it.
Yeah, I'm an angsty poet. What did you expect? But I do.
To go after you.
No, I understand. I think I hear a lot of people apologize, you know, for writing about dark stuff. But when I write about this stuff, I also want people to see themselves in it. Like, I feel like with grief, especially, it comes to a point where in everyday life, you feel like, okay, I should be over this by now. My friends don't want to hear anymore that I'm sad about my dad. And none of my friends ever said that to me. You know, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I've reached the socially acceptable amount of time to grieve, and now I just need to shut up about it. And I think writing this book in a way is a way, and putting it down on the page is a way to let people like live in that grief, right? Like, grief doesn't disappear just because you decided I talked about it too much. So when I write about things that are more dark, I am also hoping that people who are kind of dealing with the same thing and maybe feel like, oh, I've talked about this too much, will be able to see themselves in it and be like, oh, it's a human experience. I'm in community and in communion, you know, with
art and other people. I just want to add on that I think it's so great. It's a great function of poetry and how prolific you are. That when a grief poem might come across someone's desk at the right time and meet them, then they can say like, oh, this really speaks to me, and I'm going to check out her other work, and then they have this world that they can like connect with even more to find other ways you've explored the themes. You know.
I think that's true in general, though, right? That writers are opening space for people to feel at home in a lot of ways, right? That oh, I've experienced that too, and this has happened to someone else, and I didn't know what to do, and thank God I'm not all by myself doing this, right? Yeah. Christine, in your novel, The Girls and Queens, you write, quote, "The weight of protecting other people and their emotions and their desires for so long." I'm interested in this statement, and I'm wondering if you think that it is a particularly female burden to carry other people and their emotions and desires. And Emily, I want to hear from you.
I'm sure Burisma says that in the book, right? Do I think it's particularly female? I think that you might often hear that from women, in particular eldest daughters, in particular eldest immigrant daughters. I think it's, codependence 101, and that can happen in a whole different, so many different kinds of scenarios. Gender, regardless of gender. But yeah, I do think that we, as a mother now, I do think that we are often the person in a family unit who takes on a lot of the emotional labor of making sure everybody's okay. I'm saying that vulnerably as like a person that would identify as struggling with codependence. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, Emily?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I don't think it's strictly female, but I do think, yeah, women are often might find themselves in those situations.
And then to extend that, has it also been in American culture the burden of people of color to carry white emotion?
Repeat that again. Is it typically the burden? Is the burden typically on people of color?
To carry white emotion.
Maybe that expectation is there, but I think we reject it.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a cultural expectation towards that. Not
Sure.
that that's the way it should be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that you find that a lot of times. I was just hearing from a friend of mine who was being asked to just like. And I've been in positions too where I've been asked to swallow my discomfort to make the white people in the room feel comfortable, even when they are being racist or, bringing a complaint to a director or a higher up and just being told like, yeah, I've literally been told, you know how white people can be. So yeah, for sure I've been in that position, and historically that has been the case, but I hope more and more people feel more comfortable rejecting it, like I said, and putting the onus back on, putting the discomfort back with the white folks.
And the responsibility for taking care of it.
Yes.
Okay, see that. Sure. Emily, I found your latest book much more direct than the previous one, and you talked a little bit about that in your introductory comments. It's an interesting shift in style to me, and I'm curious which poems came first, because you talk in the other book about some of these same topics. And so how did the style shift help you to express something in particular? And then perhaps how does one, for both of you, choose a tone, funny or sad or whatever, for a collection and for a longer work like a novel?
So I forgot I mean, I haven't been thinking about the chronology of these books, but I did write this one first.
Okay.
I did, so your instincts were correct, yeah. I wrote Blood Music before I wrote In a Body. It just, they didn't get published in that order. It's, sometimes one book just takes longer to come together and get chosen. Blood Music is more direct because I believe because I was writing it in the moment. A lot of these poems are poems that could read almost as diary entries. There's a few that I wrote in the center section, right before the father dies, where those ones are a little more obscure, they're a little more surreal, but they're very much like diary entries. I sat down and wrote about the heat lightning and the weird note my dad wrote on the whiteboard and some other things, and they really were, they went through a lot of editing, but they were very much therapeutic writing for me, which doesn't always make good poetry. And certainly there were tons that I was like, nope, you don't make the cut. You're staying in the garbage can where you belong, poem. But I think the direct nature of the poems is partially because I was just there in it, and I didn't have a lot of emotional capacity at the time to really do much else. When it came to In a Body, even though there's a lot of grief in it, it's also a lot about being diagnosed with chronic illness, and I have a lot of animal and plant and fungal imagery in it because I was looking almost academically at ecosystems and how ecosystems functioned, and then sort of the ecosystem of the body. And I think that the interplay there, since I was kind of toying with that, there was a lot more room for metaphor and imaginative leaps that Blood Music didn't have. And then there's also randomly some poems in Blood Music that are 15 years old that just about my loved one with the addiction, which there were some that are very recent that I wrote during that time period, but then there were ones that I'd written in the past, and I was like, this is their chance. This is probably the only book that I'm gonna have with this through line, I gotta write it now. So I feel like that's a fun one. Can you tell which ones I wrote in grad school?
So for the tone of the Girls in Queens, what I can say about that is that in early reads, beta readers are people you give your book to early on in the process to get feedback. I would give the manuscript of this novel to people, and one person said, I'm going to need 1 or 12 redeeming qualities of Kelly to understand and root for this friendship. So I wrote a sign and put it up in front of my desk that said "small kindnesses and friendship," and kept returning to that and trying to hit that a little bit in my revisions to humanize the friendship and bring a gentleness and a love. And a familiarity between the girls that would help understand and then break your heart as you read the book as they grow. And I also, the book takes place between 1996, 2000, and 2006, so I tried to keep it fresh, quote unquote fresh, or relevant to that time with the slang and the language that the girls used. I wanted to make sure it felt like you would overhear these girls on a subway or on the streets. And then I think for the new book that I'm writing, I've been very conscious of wanting to write a ghost story about reproductive justice that's funny. So I know what I read wasn't funny, but there's a character who joins the main character in present day on a trip to Puerto Rico to accompany her to reunite her grandmother's ashes. Her grandmother has just died. And the friend is hilarious, and the friend is joking all the time, and she's a huge source of comic relief that I think that I know is necessary to go real dark.
All right, so I am going to open it up now to the audience for questions. What would you like to ask these two authors about their work?
Well, I loved both your readings. It was really moving and powerful. My question is for Emily. I was curious about the poetic form of the guzzle. I've never heard of it before. Do you know anything about the history of it?
Yes, it's a Western Asian form, and it's traditionally not written in English, but it has been co-opted certainly by writers who write in English. There's different ways of doing it. I did like a very loose guzzle. I think that when you're doing it much more like as formally as it can be done, before the last word that repeats, you'll have a word that rhymes. Like with, not with the repeating word, but like with itself. So like, it could be like, I'm like, now I can't think of anything that rhymes. Like, snow blossoms, or there were no blossoms, you know. So there would just be like, there'd be like an O sound before each time the word blossom appears. You can tell I don't write rhyming poetry that much. I do sometimes though. I swear I know rhyming words. So yeah, I think that's the most strict form, but there's always a turn in the last. I mean, not always. Some poets don't do it, but I like to have the turn in the last line where we hear the speaker of the poem use their own name in the third person. I feel like it's fun and has such a like conversational tone. Like when you have the writer use their name in the third person. So I was like, I'm keeping that.
Is it unusual for you to write in a strict format like that?
You know, generally, yes, it is. The guzzle is one that I've played with a few times. This is the only one that I've ever published, the only guzzle I've published. I went through a phase where I was writing pantoums, which is like a form written in quatrains where like the two lines, like, here's the quatrain.
First and third.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is the quatrain, and they follow each other.
So like the first and third move down, and then the ones that didn't move down, the new lines, they'll move down to the next one, and then the new lines there will move down until you get to the last stanza, and then the lines that would have been new are the first two that didn't get repeated yet from the very first stanza. So it kind of like zippers together. That one is really fun. I wrote 1 million of them, but I don't know if they're any good. But I was going through a dry spell, and I was like, this is great, and it was very fun.
Sorry, I meant to do this before you gave it back. For the people here who don't know what a turn is.
Oh,
Yeah, so a turn is when the tone of a poem shifts very dramatically, kind of like a slap in the face, but from words.
There you go. Very good. Okay, great. Other questions? Yeah.
For both writers, how do you guys know when if it's a novel or a poem is like good enough? Not just because like you like it, but you make sure that others will engage with it. So what gives you like, okay, this is my goal, and I think this is enough, so the reader feels connected as well. Great question. Should it make sense?
Yeah, when do you know the novel's ready? Like, has it accomplished your goals? I mean, that's an interesting question for, to answer. When are you personally ready with it? I've been working on this book for 2 years and have not sent it to anybody to read as a cohesive manuscript yet. So how will I know when I'm ready? I think you need to do a few revisions. I can answer for myself. I usually have to do a few revisions of an entire manuscript before I feel confident that this is ready for other people's eyes. I don't know what that was. Before I know it's ready for other people to read, and then once I do share it with beta readers, like I just said, like early trusted writers that I value their feedback, then I might share it with an agent. Or, then we're talking about getting it out into the world. Yeah, I think with the Girls and Queens, I had to get to a place where I was I was like exhausted. Like I felt like I truly felt I had taken it as far as I could, and now it had to be somebody else's problem. Like I needed somebody else to tell me like what needs to happen here. Like what can I fix? How can we elevate it? When you get to that point, when I get to that point, then I think I know. I've done as much as I can at this stage. But please know that there are so many more revisions that happen after that. Like all along through the process.
I think for poetry it's a little bit different because you could publish like every poem in your manuscript first, like in a literary journal separately. So when it comes to knowing when like one single poem is done and ready to send out for submission, I actually have a couple writers groups that I'm a part of, and the first thing I'll do is bring a poem there if I feel like it's almost ready. And generally I don't do a lot of revising before I bring it to a writers group just because I hate it. I hate revising so much, so deeply. Not when I write fiction. I don't know, it's different. When I write poetry, I'm like afraid to revise my poems sometimes because if you knock out, it's like Jenga, if you knock out the wrong line, the whole poem will just fall apart. So I bring it to the writers group and we read it twice, and I just like get feedback. And I feel really lucky to be in these writing groups because for me, I would never know if a poem is ready. I would never know. Instead, I have like my cohort to tell me like, send this, fix these couple things, and then just send it out. And so that's kind of like, I have other people tell me. Every now and then I'll write a poem and I'll be like, oh, it's good, it's done. And then I kind of trust my gut, I trust my instincts. But it took a while for me to get to the place where I could trust my instincts, you know? Like years of rejections and every now and then acceptances, you know, before I feel like I really could look at a poem and say, you know what? Doesn't need to be seen by a writer's group, it's okay. I think at the early stage of like a writing career, it's really important to get feedback. But also to know that feedback is, you know, just coming from another human. It's not all gonna be right for you, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to underscore too that writers groups have been invaluable to me. I haven't sent the entire manuscript that I'm currently working on to anybody, but I do meet with a writers group and we share like 20 pages at a time. And so getting that feedback and confidence boosts from them, like, yeah, this is worth focusing on. Like, you're not wasting your life. That's great. How about you, Laurel? Do you know when?
You're not wasting your life?
Yeah,
I don't think I am wasting my life.
It's always helpful to hear.
Or do you know when you're done with that?
I don't know. Sometimes, you know, with the poems, they just come. And you get to the end and you think, wow, that was amazing. How did I do that? That's pretty wonderful. But I have a novel I'm working on now. I put it aside. I was like, this sucks. I never want to see it again. I didn't look at it for 6 months, and then I thought, oh, I know how I can solve that problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just, you have to keep at it, and eventually you learn to trust yourself, I think, maybe. Other questions? Yes?
How do you like come up with ideas? Like what inspires you to write what, like for both of you, like novels, poems?
I'm sure.
Well, as you could probably tell from Blood Music, I was inspired directly from my life. I was like everyone in my life is poetry fodder. Sorry, that's what happens when you love a poet. So that is one. I definitely write about my own experiences and the experiences of my relationships with my loved ones. But when that's run dry and I've written everything I could about everyone I know, I like science for inspiration. Like the poem I read about the shark. Like I love like a weird fact. I have a lot of poems. I have a couple in Blood Music one's about the Cassini mission, which was a NASA probe that took pictures like of the moons of Saturn before plummeting to a fiery demise. I have some poems about the Hubble telescope. I like to follow along with, like science discoveries, and then I'm like, how can I make this a metaphor for like my life? So that, I get inspired a lot by, science and just my everyday life.
Wait, before you pass that off, I also noticed that there were a lot of otherworldly things in this book, like charms and lightning that you might see or not, or the Milky Way, or dreams and the goddess of spring. How did that come to be?
You know, someone else noticed that. It got a little right up in Ms. and they were like, it's an incantation. And I swear to you, I did not notice that theme.
Oh, wow.
I did not notice that theme until I saw that little write-up. I was like, oh, it is. There's an incantation. There are a few incantations in here. There's like a charm to get the sibling home safe, and then there's the like magic spell at the end while brushing the daughter's hair. I don't know. I think that was like a product of feeling helpless. I think this is me like totally revisionist because I don't know what I was thinking in the moment, but I believe, looking at it now, that I was feeling helpless, and I was sort of like, how can I have control over this? You know, like you can't. Sorry, Emily. You have no control over the universe or your life. But I think that I was like using these magical strands to sort of be like, if I can wish really hard, like my loved ones will be okay. You know, I think that's where that came from. I couldn't say for sure.
I think for me, my preoccupations or obsessions are usually a good wound to press or like a good thing to follow. For the Girls and Queens, I was at are there Mets fans here? No. Okay. So
Wow.
all you need to know is that they don't often win, or they don't often get to the World Series, okay? So in 2015, they did get to the World Series. They lost. But I won tickets to go to a game at Citi Field, and while I was there, I felt very nostalgic for the last time that they had gotten close enough in the playoffs, which was in 2006. And that was with a heavily Latino team for the first time, with a Latino general manager who had grown up in Queens. Also, it felt very much like representation matters. Hashtag representation matters. And so I was inspired by that and wanted to capture that time in 2006. And that was in 2015. And around that time was also when the Brock Turner case was in the news, which was an athlete at Stanford who was on trial for attempted assault of Chanel Miller? Yes, I think Chanel Miller, who has a memoir called Know My Name, which I highly recommend. And I was following that case in the newspapers, and there was eyewitnesses that caught him like red-handed, and yet still there were people that would come forward and vouch for him and talk about how this would ruin his life and think about his future, and nobody was talking about her present and her future. And so I had seen that all felt very familiar to me, even though it was in the Ivy League, this prestigious university. But I'd also seen it happen in very working class immigrant and Latino neighborhoods in Queens, and I felt like there was a unique nuance to it that I had experienced of not wanting to come forward with any case because you could add to the deck that's already stacked against a man of color, if a man of color had trespassed against you. So I wanted to explore that, and I figured I could combine those preoccupations of mine into one story where I explored an athlete being accused of this in Queens. So I think your preoccupation, something that sticks with you, that your brain keeps returning to, that's probably a rich ground to pull from and to build a story or explore what it is that keeps bringing you back there.
Great.
Okay, so please give them a round of applause for this wonderful presentation that they've done. Thank you both so much for coming. And the writers have brought books with them tonight to sell. Writers need to eat too. And if you have a couple extra bucks and you'd like to contribute to their eating, they are on the table over there or behind you. Please feel free, and the writer will sign it for you since they are here this evening. That's the end of the program. Thank you so much for coming.